So these ancient beach lines, this again is that same cross section drawn a little differently from a different author. You got your marine mud and clay, your sand and gravels, your diamict, which is a geological term. You got your bedrock below all that. This grade, from all those samples, they show the grade, and you can see this. This is the 65 to 72 foot beach line, which has a gold grade. In this, the scale isn't, the numbers aren't shown on here, but the relative scale, your 35 foot beach line has twice the amount of gold as your 72 foot beach line. So as you get closer to the source, one beach line, the grade doubles. And then it doubles again as you get into the 15 foot beach line. And then once you get onto shore, the modern beach had about double the gold as the 15 foot beach line. And as you get closer to the lode source at the base of Anvil Mountain, the grade doubled a couple more times. So each ancient beach line is about half as rich as the next closest one to the source. So right now, the last 20 years or so, these offshore miners have been mostly focusing on that 15 foot beach line. And as they're pushing into the 35 foot beach line, that is going to be half as rich. And the ones that are pushing to the deeper waters, like RMR is trying to do with their 15,000 acres of leases, that's again that's a quarter as rich as the 15 foot beach line, according to the studies and these samples. So the WestGold sampling in 1984 and 5, WestGold did about 3,500 samples, some with an excavator through the ice, some with a 6-inch churn drill. They did 1 meter vertical increments. They spent about $7 million for about $1,000 to $4,000 per sample site. And from this, they produced a treasure map, which I meant to put a picture on here, but I could not find the DNR map that they put out before the lease sale. So the main thing is, this is a very, very, very well-studied area. It's one of the most well-studied areas as far as gold content. The geology is well understood. There's really not much need for any modern operation to have a geologist to interpret the data or to gather new data, unless you're really interested in something other than what they studied for WestGold. From the WestGold findings, the first meter has about 21% of the gold to bedrock. Basically, the first meter, though, is, as most of us miners know, is down to the clay. So the gravel on top of the clay has about 21% of the gold. You have to go another 5 meters or so to double your gold. So you're going down 15, 16 feet in order to get twice the amount of gold as you would otherwise get from just mining the first meter, which is really the first 1 to 2 feet. And this is why most operations will focus on covering the square footage or square yardage, not cubic yardage. So the operations like suction dredging, they do a horizontal mining on the surface, as opposed to the grab dredgers, which dig deep and transect multiple layers. That's far more effective for hand-operated suction dredging, to focus just on that top 21%, the cream, if you will, and leave the rest of this for future technologies when gold is higher than it is now. This other graph shows the normalized gold grade. So what it shows is there's a lot of barren land out there, but the vast majority is what would be considered moderate, which is there's gold in it, but it's a fairly weak content. It could be economically viable if you could move a lot of it for fairly cheaply. Most of what people, suction dredgers and grab dredgers use or focus on is the high grade areas, which is a very limited subset of the entire region. So the high and extremely high is targeted. If you think about a suction dredger can only move 5 to 10 yards an hour, they're going to be focused on the highest grade they can find in the limited seasons that they have. So as this extremely high grade gets eaten up, and most of it has, you're going to see larger operations that can move more material at a weaker grade profitably. Previous mining techniques, the most significant offshore mining operation of all time was the Bima bucket line dredge by the WestGold Company. More details on Bima next slide, but it's massive. I wanted to get a side-by-side comparison of this to the new hospital, but I'm pretty sure the Bima was larger than the new hospital. The WestGold Bima operated from 1986 to 1990. It came up in late season 1986, so mostly it was 1987 to 1990. It's 600 feet long, 140 feet high. It processed 600 yards per hour, 10.9 ounces per hour on average. 1.8 million yards per year, cubic yards that is, 130 acres average per year, 29,000 ounces per year, and 118,000 ounces total. Today's dollars, that would be $120 million after refining. So, pretty significant, massive dredge. Very well studied. They spent millions of dollars on their environmental impact, hundreds of thousands per year. Yeah.
You know how shallow they could mine?
So they were fairly limited in the depths. I have on another slide the areas where they mined, but if you got too shallow with the buckets, they would empty before they could get up. So they liked a pretty steep. They liked 60 feet, but they went shallower. I think they went as shallow as 30. And even then, they would want to establish their hole and then move in it, which is fairly hard to do. They had massive anchors, 6,000-pound anchors on chains and cables. Might have been larger than 6,000-pound anchors. It was quite the operation. I wish I had seen it. They shut down in 1990 because it was not economic at 29,000 ounces a year. Areas mined prior to 1991, including the Bima. So this hex mark area, you can see the mined areas focused on the base of Anvil Mountain, where the high school is now, and the intermediate beach, the second beach, and your submarine beach, which is along the coast. This map shows the significant areas. There's 3 significant zones. Offshore Nome, the west flank, which is also known as Jess Creek, also known as Tom Cod, the central core, which is from the jetty to the west quite a bit and out, and then the glacial thrust zone, and the Bima focused on that glacial thrust zone in block number 8. So Tom Cod, Iris, and Heather were the names of some of those zones. There's also Coho and a few others. Also shown here, you can see the lease boundaries from the 1962 lease sale. I might be off on that year. I had trouble finding the exact date, but it was shortly after statehood. Alaska auctioned off offshore mineral rights, including the Nome region, as well as others for oil and gas development, but it also covered gold and other minerals. So this shows more clearly the Bima mined areas. Again, here's the lease boundaries from the 1962 lease sale, and these dark areas are where the Bima mined, out in the 62-foot beach line, 60 foot of water, and in at this 30-foot beach line in front of town and to the west, and out off of Jess Creek or Tom Cod also. Pretty significant mining operation. They covered a lot of ground. So current mining techniques, are in two categories. There's the suction dredge and the grab dredge. Suction dredges have two types. There's the diver-operated suction dredge and the diverless. Grab dredges have two basic types, the floating and the non-floating. The floating are on excavator barges, and the non-floating are surf crawlers, where they drive on the bottom and are half submerged. Diver-operated suction dredges come in several sizes. The sizes used in Nome are 4, 6, 8, 7, 10, 12. I think there might be a 14 somewhere along the line now. Usually takes 1 to 4 people. They're either harbor launch or amphibious. They use surface supply air as opposed to scuba. They use surface supply, which is also known as hookah, and they usually have a tethered diver due to the long amounts of time. The diverless suction dredges have two types. There's the arm versus crawler. Arm dredges are floating, and the arm is connected to a floating platform and sucks up, and then the crawler-based drops down to the bottom and drives along the bottom. Intake sizes that we've seen are 10-inch, 12-inch, 14-inch, and 18-inch. Usually takes 1 to 6 people, although the tram rod had significantly more. There's been about 10 or 11, maybe 12 attempted operations for either the arm or the crawler. The tram rod was Nome's first remote operated gold mining suction dredge. It was operated by the WestGold Company in 1990, or in 89 and 90. And I think it got about 2 ounces, 3 ounces. It costed several $1 million. It was a very early prototype. Of course, off the coast of Africa, the De Beers and other companies use very large machines, about the size of this building, to use suction dredging for diamonds and incidentally gold.